crafty cuties. We are going to jump right into this tutorial because I have a lot to say. We are going to make a no-sew patchwork hardcover Bohemian journal using a hidden binding method. Okay, there we go. I'm going to try to quickly go over the supplies. Most of the supplies that I am using here had come in the full kit, and if you did not purchase the kit, you can just kind of follow along and use what you have at home. I have chipboard here. This is already cut down. This is going to be a smaller journal, so I have this cut down to 5 by 7 inches, so I have 2 of those. And then I have my spine, which is 1 inch by 7 inches. That was cut out of the one piece of chipboard that came in the full kit. I have muslin here. I have my main piece, also came in the kit. And this I cut down to about 12 inches by 10. It was already almost 12 inches across, not quite, but almost. So I have that piece. I have an extra little piece here that's about 4 inches by 7. I'm going to use this for binding. What else? I have a little bit of scrapbook paper I may use to cover the insides of the book, and this is about 5 by 7. I have my pages, and I'm not going to go over decorating them in this tutorial, but we'll do binding, of course. And this is mostly going to be just coffee dyed paper, some vintage book pages that had come with the kits, but mostly coffee dyed paper, so this can be like a writing journal. And then I wanted to point out, I actually printed this out. This is the digital kit that came in the kits. However, I printed mine out smaller, and this came from Sophie at Mind Beretti on Etsy. I'm going to have the link below. So if you just have bought the video course, maybe you want to purchase the kit and follow along. It's kind of nice because you can resize and print out whatever size you want. But if you have the full kit and you're wanting to use the pages on a smaller journal, you can cut them down and still use them. And then I just have all of I have fabrics, I have trims that I'm gonna go through. I have my little embellishment pack that has like sequins and buttons and things like that. And I have my binding supplies, so I have my embroidery floss and all for punching holes, some paper clips, a little piece of graph paper. I'm not sure I'll need all this, but you know, and then I have my hot glue gun, and I'm definitely going to be using that. So let's jump into the tutorial. So I'm going to start out by gluing the chipboard pieces down to the muslin. So I always like to start with the spine, and I'm just going to cover this in glue. This is the Tombow Mono Aqua glue, my favorite glue. You guys already know that unless you're new. But you are, use whatever you have. If you like to use fabric glue, use that. You have a certain type glue that you like, just use what you like. I'm going to go ahead and glue that down first. And then I will glue the cover. I don't always smooth out the glue because I know I'm going to be covering the muslin in other fabric. But I also don't have a problem with like the glue showing through or anything like that. But if you're worried about it, or maybe you're using a glue that does show through, I like to use like a foam paintbrush and kind of spread it out so it's on there smooth and even. But I just kind of like to do things as quick as possible. Okay, so I'm lining this up with the spine, as you can see, and I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch in between here. And we'll do the same to this side. I'm going to go ahead and trim all of the corners just about like that. So there's a little bit left over from the outside to that corner. And while I'm doing that, I just wanted to mention that if you are wanting to make a patchwork journal like I'm going to today, but you want to use your sewing machine, that's great. I think the outcome is going to be amazing. So what you will want to do is have your muslin cut to the size that you need for your covers, but you're actually going to go ahead and sew your pieces on before you attach it to the hard cover. And I've done that before, and it's really nice, but it's a little bit harder to kind of estimate how much you need. So like I said, I just cut the muslin down to as close as possible. and I try to just kind of leave a blank space on the outer edges just not to waste pretty fabric, and then I sew all of my fabric on. But again, we're going to keep this super simple today. So now I'm going to add glue to all of the edges here, and I'm just going to wrap this extra fabric around the chipboard. And guys, you don't need much extra fabric to wrap around. I know that some of the muslin pieces might only be close to 12 inches, maybe even 11 inches one way and 12 the other. So use the wider side, of course, if needed. But you really only need, like, you could do less than this. You just need a small amount to wrap around this chipboard, and this chipboard's pretty thin, so yeah, you don't need much. And if you can notice, my chipboard is starting to kind of bow in a little bit. That's completely normal. This is not a super hard chipboard. And what I do is when I'm not filming, I basically just take my time with it. And in between gluing, I would set some books down on it and let it dry for a little bit. So that's what I would recommend, you know, if you have time to do that, is definitely let it dry in between with some books, and you will be good to go. It will definitely dry straight. And a lot of times what I do when I'm filming and I can't like wait in between is I'll just make my full journal, and then even when I'm done, I'll place some heavy books on and just the front and back cover, front and back, and it straightens out. So I am not concerned about that. Okay, this is ready to go. Now that this is glued down, you can see we have our base kind of ready to go. And now we are going to start decorating. I'm going to do the inside later. Okay, so now is the fun part. I'm going to start picking out fabrics that I want to use. And I am going to cut these down, but I kind of want to just go through and pick out colors that I want together. And you'll notice that in the kits, some pieces are going to be smaller. I've cut into this one, but some are going to be smaller. Some might be a little bit bigger. So just kind of see what you have and what you like and want to use on your cover. I'm going to go with like the pinks, blues, and purples. But heck, I might even use some yellow. I'm just going to use a bunch of different colors here because I like all these colors. Okay. I'm going to start with this, and I think I'm hoping to use my little embroidered piece that I have in my kit. Each kit will have at least one of these really pretty embroidered or like sequined pieces. However, a lot of the pieces have little beads and sequins and embroidery in them as well, but I pick like one main piece for each kit. So I'm probably going to use that. I may even pick out some trims that I want to use because that will be really fun to incorporate as well. So now you can decide how big you want your pieces to be. I mean, you can do bigger pieces and just have less of them. That's going to be less work, of course. But I'm wanting to cut mine down so that I have a big variety on here. And I'm probably going to cut these pieces down to like, let's see. I'm not going to measure here. I'm just going to kind of eyeball what I want, but I'll tell you, I know what size I'm kind of hoping for. Right about there, and that's probably like 1.5. It's almost 2. So it's about 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. And I'm just gonna go through and cut all of the pieces up here into that size, and then we can start assembling. And if you want it to be super perfect, you can cut one out as a guide. But I am totally fine with some of my pieces overlapping and not being perfect. And I personally like that look, but you can make this as perfect or as random as you want. So cut these and we'll be right back. So I may need more, but I think I'm good here for a start. And then I'm gonna try to keep in mind that I also have some sequin trim. I have some other trims and doilies and things that I may want to use over here. I may want to incorporate, I have this gorgeous piece of asari trim that I had set out for myself for a while now to use, and I was thinking like that might be great on the spine. But I'm just gonna start by kind of mindlessly pulling pieces and gluing them on. I'm gonna start out by using my Tombow glue because it never lets me down. I was going to use hot glue, but I mean, this always works for me. So I'm basically just going to start by gluing a section at the top here and just going across and grabbing pieces that I think look good to one another, trying not to have two of the same pieces right next to each other. And so feel free to use regular glue or hot glue. If you have a glue that you trust, I really don't think that you're going to have an issue. And I'm just going to make sure that these all hang over just a tiny bit on the edges, and I'll probably trim that at the end. So yeah, and I didn't cut these perfect because again, I kind of like the not so perfect look, but again, you do you, boo. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a bit for you guys because this is probably going to take me a good amount of time to figure out how I want this to go, but I want you to be able to see my process as well. So let's speed it up. Now you could do just the whole thing all together, but since I kind of want to break up my front, spine, and back, I'm just going to close this because I wanted to see if everything was covered. And there's this little part of fabric showing. I was thinking I could use some really pretty pink ink and kind of ink up the edges. That would look great, but I'm going to add some bling. I'm going to add my sequin trim here. Whoops, and try not to get hot glue everywhere. And I'm just going to go ahead and hot glue these sequins on. Before I move on to the spine, I am actually going to take my pink Distress Oxide ink here and ink up the edges here because I do know that a little bit of this muslin is probably going to peek through, and it's just easier to do now than it would be later. So I'm just going to go through all of the edges here. This is kind of fun because I don't usually use brighter colors, but I think this will look good. And even though, again, these might not show, I think the actual edge of it might show. So easier to do now than it would be at the end. I am going to go ahead and add this because it's just going to be so great. There are so many bells down here. And I may actually use a little hot glue for this part, but I'm going to start out by adding this. I really want to make sure that this is not going anywhere. Just a little bit, and I'm going to try to spread this out as good as I can. It is pretty bulky though. Okay, definitely get a little bit of hot glue underneath where the bells are because Those are a little heavier, obviously. There we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to the back cover as I did to the front. Yeah, I feel like you guys have probably seen enough of that part, and I want to make sure to spend more time on binding and things like that. So I'm just gonna repeat exactly what I did. Okay, so now I have this all covered, and I'm gonna go ahead and trim these edges now. For this side, I actually just went ahead and placed them all on within the border, and I think I liked that better because you can actually see the pink and it looks nice, but that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and trim this all off. All right, so I am just about done with this, and I will definitely want to use some heavy books to weight mine down because I use so much glue that it is definitely kind of bowing up, but that's okay. I can worry about that later. All right, guys, so I know that I want to add, even though there's so much going on, I definitely want to add like a little collage piece because I want this on here really bad, and I just want to add a little bit more, like, I guess, more of a centerpiece, maybe some buttons as well, but I feel like my brain's overworked on all of this right now, so I'm actually going to move to the inside. So let's do that next. It's also smart to think about if you want anything on your spine hanging off, like either a tassel or a, I'm going to go for one of the Bohemian beads that I made in this video course. And so you want to think about that because if you're punching a hole, it's better to do it now than it's going to be later. I'm actually just going to attach this, I think, with just a tiny little hole and hang this from the top. Normally I would use like a ring fastener, but I want this to be so simple. So I'm literally just eyeballing where the middle is here. Sorry guys, that wasn't in focus. I'm just gonna punch a little hole. And then you also want to think about if you are adding any closures, any like ribbons, or if you need to punch a hole for some ribbons, anything like that, kind of think about that as well. Or let's see what else, any hardware, if you want any hardware on the front, think about that before we move to the inside. But I think I am at a point where I can move to the inside. All right, so I have my bead here and it does kind of blend in, but I think it's going to be a nice touch once it's all done. So I want to make sure that my bead can be kind of moved out of the way, so if you're writing in the journal, you know, it's not bulky, but that works just fine. I think I may need to actually do my binding next because I'm going to be using a hidden binding system. So let's do that. We're going to go ahead and grab our pages. Again, mine are just ready to go. I may add some things, but I'll do the decorating after I'm done. And again, this is just coffee dyed paper and some vintage papers and things like that. So I have 13 full pages. That's going to make, I think about 52 pages when folded in half, front and back, just so you guys know. And I have them cut down to size a little less than 5 by 7. And you can see I just have them all folded into one another, just like any normal one signature would be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use paper clips, and we are going to go ahead and paper clip all of these pages together open, like so. And if you have any pages that are smaller, that don't kind of fit into your paper clip, you can go ahead and use some washi tape just to hold everything in place exactly where you want it to be. So I'm just going to go through and add lots of paper clips. And I always say that this is the part where I would take a little bit of time to make sure that everything is extra lined up exactly how you want it, because this is where you can kind of have problems if you go too fast. Holes can get punched, you know, through the sides, or things just kind of can end up not where you want them. Pages can end up upside down. So just take a little bit of extra time to go through your signature, making sure that everything's exactly how you want it, and then making sure that everything is paper clipped together really, really well. Of course, I'm going a little faster than I do normally, but I've done this many, many times. Okay, so everything is paper clipped together here. And basically what we're going to do now is we're going to take, this is going to be, I kind of call this an external spine, and we are going to bind our book pages into this. And then this is going to get glued into our book so that there is no binding on the outside spine. We're going to grab our needle and our awl. So I have this, and anything that can punch holes for you is just fine. I'm going to use my embroidery floss to bind everything in. And then I have a needle. I don't know what size this is. I just know it's big enough for my embroidery floss, and it's not too long. So we are going to go ahead and measure out about, I usually do like 2.5 times our page length. So trim that off there. And this isn't really going, what color you use isn't going to matter too much on a hidden binding because it's not really going to show except for in the center here. So go ahead now and just thread your needle. And I just go through once, leaving a little tail like that. I'm not going to tie the end either. Since we are just doing one signature, I'm not actually going to measure anything. If I had 2 signatures or 3, I would definitely measure where I wanted each signature to be. Each signature would be a row, and then I would make sure that the holes were somewhat close together. However, it really doesn't matter because it's not going to show through. So we're just going to do the one, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball where the middle of this is. You do want anything that you are binding into, you want it to be smaller than your spine. So I hope that makes sense. So let's say that you have 3 signatures. You probably would want to measure, making sure that you only are going to sew into the amount of space that you have that is less than what your spine is, okay? But since I only have 1, I don't have to do any measuring. All right, I hope I'm making sense, guys, but this one is I'm just going to eyeball this again because I have lots of wiggle room here. And I'm just going to make sure that this is going to be on the center, as close to the center as possible. I'm going to use a couple paper clips just to make this much easier. And I'm going to paper clip the muslin right in place so that it will stay put. And I'm just gonna paper clip 2 down there, 2 up here.